We are here with Ariel Helwani of MMAfighting.com getting set for UFC 175 Saturday night, and then they come back 24 hours later with the Tough 19 finale, all taking place from the Mandalay Bay Event Center. And Ariel, we have BJ Penn's return. We have two finals of The Ultimate Fighter. We have two title fights on Saturday, and yet I feel all of it is overshadowed by a story that you broke last weekend surrounding Chael Sonnen, a second random drug test that came back positive over the past month for him. And to me, this has the potential to have severe repercussions within the industry, and it seems that random testing is the top of mind topic right now.
It is, especially here in Nevada. The last time I was here in Nevada was Memorial Day weekend, UFC 173. They had that press conference, and Chael stole the show, right?
Yes.
He was on stage, and it's kind of funny how it was Chael and Vanderlei, and then it turned into Chael and Vitor, and then none of those fights, none of those guys are here now, and it's all really, because of drug testing. I don't agree, though, that it's overshadowing the weekend. I mean, obviously, it's a big story. We didn't have a chance to talk to Dana White today, and that probably would have dominated the discussion for a little bit. But when you see Chris, and I think I think very highly of him, and I think he deserves probably a little more respect than he gets. You see Ronda Rousey, and you see Machida, and you see a legend like BJ Penn back. I mean, I will admit, I asked them about drug testing because Chris, Ronda, BJ, just so happens, have talked about this a lot, but you kind of forget about it a little bit. And this news cycle moves so quickly in our sport. There are so many events, so many fighters, things of that nature that, yes, it's a very big story. It should not be forgotten. It should be discussed as much as possible, and I hope that they do more. But I don't feel like it's so much of a black cloud hanging over the event. I still think there's anticipation for these fights.
I think that there is a lot of interest for these fights, but I just think that this story has the potential to at least enact some sort of change, where it be a fighter that maybe 2 months ago would take something without any fear. There is at least that dangle now that this random testing has caught a number of people already, and I think that there is that fear that people are going to paintbrush a lot of these athletes based on a few that have been caught.
Fighters are interesting, though, because think about it. Chael Sonnen was tested May 24th. And he failed that test for two substances, not HGH and EPO. And he was tested again later. So he knew that he was on something on May 24th, and he tested again later, and that's when he had the HGH and EPO. In other words, now I'm not painting Chael with this brush, but fighters sometimes think that they're Teflon. Sometimes they think that, I won't get caught. Oh, maybe I'll get tested once and I could do this. Fighters are interesting beasts. I mean, you would think by now, look, if I got into MMA right now, if I was a pro athlete, I'm so neurotic that I would be afraid to take like a Flintstones vitamin. Trust me, I think a lot of guys are taking more than that these days. So I don't know if it's going to be like that quite yet, but I do think that there's starting to be this fear, and I know fighters have talked to their friends, their teammates, being like, guys, things are happening. You need to smarten up. Let's see how often this happens, and also let's see how often it happens outside of Nevada, because Nevada seems to be doing a great job. But what happens when they go to California? What happens when they go to Ohio and Michigan and Texas? What happens there?
Is it not also the time to kind of look at some of these other shows that, Bellator is the #2 organization in the U.S. right now that runs tons of Indian reservations, no drug testing. I think in 2014, that's ludicrous.
Absolutely. I mean,
that question to me is also one that should be raised.
Absolutely. And what kind of random drug testing is being done when the UFC goes international? I mean, when they go international as much, if not more, than national here in the United States. They're testing guys, but what are they doing? And really, at the end of the day, I mean, random drug testing, as we've been saying for a long time, is the absolute. I mean, that's what needs to happen. You'd really have to be an idiot, and Dana White has said this himself, to fail a drug test before or after fight, like Friday or Saturday. You know it's happening. Cycling, you know how to get off that. I mean, you should know, unless you're not very well versed in this stuff. It's the random drug tests that are catching all these guys. It's the random drug tests that I think is putting fear in some of these athletes. That's what needs to be done. So are they random drug testing guys on the Ireland card? Are they random drug testing guys in Macau? That, to me, is the big question.
And I would also argue that,
it's also very expensive.
It's very expensive, but it's also for the UFC to put that on their shoulders to just think ethically without the business side of it. There is no doubt that Chael Sonnen and Vanderlei on this card Saturday night does more buys than it does as in present form. There isn't that necessary urge for the UFC outside of trying to maintain a clean sport when you're trying to run a business, and that's why I think you need that outside entity to be championing this entire cause, and it shouldn't have to fall on the UFC shoulders because it is a conflict for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, trust me, they would want, you know, Chael Sonnen and Vanderlei Silva to be on this card. I think we do owe them some, you know, some props, a tip of the cap for doing what they did with Chael. Chael is a very big part of the UFC. He's a very big part of Fox, and I know I work for Fox. They think very highly of Chael, and he does great work on TV. For them to make that decision, it had to be hard, but I think, you know, they were put in a tough spot because the UFC has really taken a hard stance on drug testing, and how can you do that if he's going to fail multiple drug tests? So, you know, I'd love to hear from Chael at some point. He gave me a statement, but it was a very brief one, and he kind of linked it to the testosterone use. But you talk to anyone who's in the know, they would say that there's no real connection between the testosterone stuff and having to take HGH and EPO. But I'd love to hear from him at some point. And, you know, I think for Chael, if in fact he did try to get a leg up, the best thing at this point is to just say, look, guys, I'm sorry. I messed up. I screwed up. I'm sorry. Because history has shown, you know, I don't know if you're a baseball fan, but when Andy Pettitte came out and said that, Yankee fans just forgot about it. When A-Rod tried to dance around the issue and continues to this day, they despise him for it. If you're just honest with people, it's amazing how they'll forgive you.
Let's get to the fights coming up this Saturday. Chris Weidman and Lyoto Machida is a really fascinating fight that most people I've spoken to going back and forth with. I mean, Lyoto Machida just presents that very, very difficult style. There's certain questions around Chris Weidman with his two knee scopes. He maintains he's completely fine, but I think it's a really fascinating main event. Much more interesting, I think, than the Vitor Belfort fight. What do you think about this particular fight and where Chris Weidman is right now, where a lot of promotion is now placed on his shoulders?
Well, I do think it is a tougher fight for Chris than the Vitor fight. Perhaps a tougher fight for Chris than the Anderson fight because Lyoto has very good takedown defense. Obviously, we know how he does against wrestlers. Wrestlers tend to get anxious when they fight him, and they throw out their game plan and they do something dumb. I mean, yeah, he lost to Phil Davis, but I consider that a win for Lyoto Machida. I scored it for Lyoto Machida. But I consider Chris Weidman a little more than just a wrestler. I think very highly of him. I consider him top 3 pound for pound. I think it's crazy that we still don't consider him top 3 pound for pound when he beat the pound for pound king twice. And people say, what, it was a fluke? And it was not a fluke. He fought him 4 rounds, and he beat him decisively in all 4 of those rounds. And he almost finished him in the first round of the second fight. He's a very good fighter. I think he's one of these kind of freak athletes who has just, you know, when he started doing jiu-jitsu, what he was doing, you know, as a white belt was just unbelievable. His wrestling career was great. What he's been doing with his striking as of late has been great. When you hear what he does in the gym, especially coming off those 2 knee procedures, he's jogging the next day. The guy is a freak. I think it's going to be a tough fight for him, but I do think he wins. I think he's better than Machida. He's obviously younger than Machida. Machida's looked good at 185, and it's amazing. You know what's amazing? And I just noticed this yesterday. The last time Lyoto Machida fought in Las Vegas, UFC 98. Yeah. When he won the title,
5 years ago.
the Machida, that was the last time. That's pretty amazing for a guy of his stature, the last time he fought here. And now he's back. And it could be an amazing story. It'd be just the 3rd guy to win the title in 2 different weight classes, just the 9th guy over 36 or over to fight for a UFC belt. I think obviously the key to all that is drinking urine for breakfast. I mean, that has to be it, and hopefully they test for that. But I just think Machida just isn't at the level of Chris Weidman, and I see Chris Weidman winning.
There's so much, I think, interest in seeing BJ Penn fight one more time. There's a new chapter here at 145 pounds. What is it about BJ Penn that just people are just captivated by? Can he channel the BJ Penn of old? What will he present for us at 145 pounds? And I think come Sunday night, that crowd is going to be going ecstatic for that particular fight. And I have a feeling that Monday morning, it's going to be BJ Penn and Frankie Edgar that most are talking about. Wow. Because I think it just has that feel of just 2 almost, I don't want to say different eras. It's a kind of discredit to BJ, but just he's just such a captivating fighter, and I can't put my thumb on it why that is when we get excited for a BJ Penn fight.
Well, I'm excited about the fact that we're seeing 3 of the best walkouts in MMA right now. I love Ronda's walkout. I think it's great. I like Chris's a lot. Tom Petty won't back down, great. And BJ's walkout, in my opinion, is even Frankie coming out to Biggie is great. So that excites me very much. I do agree. It's kind of like John Jones. Every time John Jones fights, we talk about his personality over. And with BJ, this is the thing that we always talk about with him, right? And I have to admit, we spoke to him today. man, I was just blown away by his demeanor. I mean, if he really is 148 pounds or so right now, he was just in such a good mood. He is just so carefree, smiling. He's much different than when he fought Roy McDonald. I think in the back of his mind, he knew that he was biting off a little more than he could chew. He truly believes that he picked this fight. This is a fight that he wanted because he knows that he could beat him. And there are a lot of people who think that it's 1-1. You know, this is not the fight that I wanted to see. I don't think this is the fight a lot of people wanted to see for BJ. No one really cared to see him fight at 145. No one cared to see him fight Frankie Edgar a second time. The second fight was not that much, you know, it wasn't that exciting. Let's be honest, right? UFC 118 in Boston. But I just
Randy Couture against a mysterious boxer that night.
Yes, James Toney. But look, BJ Penn is a legend. He's a draw in an era when there aren't that many draws, when there aren't that many legends still sticking around. He's one of those guys who won a title in 2 different weight classes, and he's just so charismatic, and we're drawn to this man. And I would hate to see him go. I think this is a good fight I don't see him getting brutally knocked out by Frankie Edgar. I think it's amazing that he's such a huge underdog going into this fight. We've come in a weird way. We've gone to 180. Frankie was a huge underdog the first time. Now he's the huge underdog. I don't know. I don't know if 145 is the weight class for him. But if this BJ, even if he loses a decision, I still want to see him fight. I mean, he seems to be in a great place now. Have his skills diminished? We'll see. But I agree. I am fascinated. I kind of wish it was on the pay-per-view because that would have made the pay-per-view really strong. But we're getting it for free.
And one story that's kind of just fallen somewhat under the radar is Stefan Struve's return on Saturday. Hasn't fought since March of 2013. And when you hear heart problems to that degree, his aortic valve leaking, I mean, very real possibility that he was done fighting, much less coming back here on this stage against Matt Mitrione. And I think that's a really interesting story going into this main card that you haven't heard too much about as we get closer to Saturday.
Because of the names involved, you know, Ronda and Chris and BJ Penn, etc. But I totally agree. What a story. And credit to him. When he first talked to me about this, he said 100% I'm coming back. And that sounded kind of crazy. I mean, you kind of felt bad for him. He's like, this guy doesn't really realize what he's dealing with here. This is a heart problem. He's coming back. Funny story, I actually spoke to Matt Mitrione yesterday about this fight, and I said to him, like, do you kind of feel bad that you're fighting a guy who has a heart problem? He's like, no, I'm going to kick his ass. So Matt Mitrione does not feel bad, and Mitrione doesn't feel like this is some sort of, you know, feel-good story or anything like that. But yeah, it's a good heavyweight fight. And then, of course, you have the Uriah Faber fight. Uriah Hall's always interesting, kind of a fascinating character in himself, who I always get the sense that he doesn't really want to do this. And that's on the pay-per-view. So it's not Brock Lesnar. You know, 5 years ago, this weekend was UFC 100, and that was gigantic. If this feels big to anyone, that just felt, you know, monstrous. It's not that. Let's call it like we see it. But it still feels special. And with so many events, it's sometimes tough for the UFC to make special events. And I think they've done a good job thus far.
Last thing also on this weekend is World Series of Fighting, their debut on NBC.
Yes.
A positive running the same day or a negative?
No. Unbelievably stupid. Why would they do this? This is NBC not being all in. This is NBC saying, we have an opening. It's a quiet weekend. Let's put you on Saturday afternoon. Now, thank God for them that they didn't put them on Saturday night. I mean, okay, thank you, NBC, for doing that for a World Series of Fighting. But to me, Justin Gaethje versus Nick Newell is a fantastic fight. Nick Newell is Mr. Must-See TV. That guy, you have to watch when he's fighting. Gaethje has been amazing thus far in World Series of Fighting. He's undefeated. They're both undefeated. It's a great fight. 2 fighters that they helped cultivate, especially Gaethje. No one knew him before. It's unfortunate. I mean, there's going to be no media there unless you're local media. No one's talking about it. And there are some other big names. I mean, if their original card had been kept together with Tyrone Spong and Paul Harris and Fitch, that would have been a fantastic card. It's still very interesting. With the debut of Melvin Gillard, Fitch fighting on the card, and you still have some names there that are worth mentioning. So I think it's very unfortunate, but you know, they got lucky, I think. And this may sound crazy, but the fact that the United States lost in the World Cup, I think that would have been a very tough sell for people to have to watch that and then have to watch them 12-2 and then 4-6 and then a UFC pay-per-view. If you're just a casual sports fan, it's a lot of time that you're devoting to watching sports on that Saturday, you know, in the middle of the summer. So they got lucky there, I think, especially from an NBC sports standpoint. But yeah, I wish they were doing this next weekend when there's nothing going on next weekend. But that's NBC saying, you know, this is a quiet weekend and let's put you on there because not that many people are watching TV. If they do well, great for them. And I heard that 99% of their affiliates have cleared it, so they'll be showing it on NBC, and that's historic. NBC has never shown live MMA, so hopefully for the sport they do well.
It's a whole day of mixed martial arts on Saturday with World Series of Fighting leading into UFC 175 and then the Tough 19 finale happening Sunday night. Catch Ariel Helwani, all of his great work at MMAfighting.com. The MMA Hour, it airs every Monday at 1 p.m. Eastern except for next week, where it will be on Tuesday as Ariel Helwani turns 32 years old.
Wow.